Welcome, everyone. I'm Jamie Flinchball, host of People Solve Problems podcast, and today we have as a guest Kevin Tarrant. Kevin, how you doing?
Great, Jamie. How are you?
I'm great. Really glad to have you with us today. Just a little introduction. You have 40 years of human capital experience in a wide range of industries, from manufacturing, high-tech software development, services, global. You've been in a lot of different roles in that human capital space. Your last sort of corporate role was as CHRO for WABCO, which is when I first met you,
Yeah.
talking about your idea of HR being a co-pilot, and now as president of HR Co-Pilot Consulting, which is great.
There you go.
Take your message forward. Since leaving WABCO, your focus has been on uh, coaching and supporting individuals maximize their potential and strengths to achieve their career goals, which includes teaching and coaching and other things. So looking forward to talking with you today. Now, I wrote this book called People Solve Problems, right? That was very intentional, that it
Yes.
takes people to do it. And you come at it from a human capital perspective. So what is your fundamental take on the role human capital plays in the problem solving of the organization?
Well, it's interesting, Jamie, because when we worked together a long time ago, we were a lean Six Sigma environment, right? But a very global company. We had employees in over 30 countries. And as we implemented this throughout the world, we realized that, we have different cultures trying to work together to solve problems. And so my take and what I've learned over my last 40 years is there's a huge human component element to problem solving. Obviously, you need the tools and the processes to structure things around for employees, but to get employees to trust each other, to respect each other, to understand there's different strengths and skills and why we may put some of those people on that problem solving team to maximize that, to offset maybe other skills that some people don't have, to me, that's just as critical to successful problem solving and anything else. So I do love your title because problem solving is what we hire people for. I mean, sometimes people look at their job and say, this is my job. But if at the end of the day, if you're in a job and you cannot show directly that I am impacting the top line, the revenue, or the bottom line, reducing costs or continuous improvement, companies are vicious at constantly continuous improvement, and they're going to automate that job, they're going to outsource it, or they're going to eliminate it. So you might be comfortable now, but in the future, job may be gone. I think, I hate to say it, I had to lay off thousands of people in my career, right? Or eliminate jobs.
Right.
It was amazing how many people were shocked when it happened. And I'm like, didn't you see this technology coming? Didn't you see we were changing this, right? Even lean, right? And Six Sigma, we are reducing work, right? Getting to the solution faster, right? We are eliminating waste.
Mhm.
Okay. So if we're doing that, we'll need less people. However, if you have the problem solving skills and continuous improvement mindset, I have plenty more jobs for you,
Right.
right? So that's why I really liked your title because I think it is there is that's why we hire people to solve problems. The question for anybody is, do you understand your skill set? Are you growing your capabilities to solve problems, continuous improvement? And how do you interact and work with others effectively? That's just as important.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, we were having an AI conversation as you talk about technology and comparing, toll collectors on the highway whose automation really replaced versus going back decades, ATMs did not replace tellers. In fact, there's more people in that sort of basic role at banks today because the role evolved to do more and
Yeah.
different things. And so there's different paths that roles can play and that people can play based on technology changing the work. So just coming at that from an HR perspective, what is the role in the organization, whether it's HR or people managers, and is it more about hiring people with those problem solving skills, building those problem solving skills in the people that are there, or perhaps matching those skills where they best fit, or all of the above?
Yeah, let me back up as your first comment about there's a lot of concern about AI, right? Eliminating jobs or impacting jobs. Let's be clear. This has been going on for decades. You've been around and I've been around. I was in manufacturing in the 80s. Guess what? We brought in Six Sigma, right? Lean. We started to, make huge improvements. Then we started to automate, right? We had, different kinds of machines that we didn't need workers at, right? They became computer based, right? 90s, I actually moved to the service industry. They were behind continuous improvement because manufacturing was the focus of the 80s. Then we took it to the service industry, right? So this has been going on forever, right? For as far as long as my 40 years.
Hmm.
AI may accelerate some of this elimination. However, people still need to work together. I mean, how many times have you been in a room and I dealt with different cultures? There's certain cultures that will never say no in a room
Hmm.
with peers.
Right.
Outside that meeting, they will. You have to understand some of these cultural differences. Nothing like reading a room. I had, different executive meetings. I could read the room like that president of that division is not on board, right? You know, so these are the things where we do. So I think where HR is changing, and I even had it for my own career, I changed a lot of industries, right? So someone might say, well, I want someone from the car industry, Kevin, you know, if you want to get a job in the automotive. It's really about competencies. Actually, I applied those competencies from different industries and we focus on competencies. So, building relationships, those type of things, right? Problem solving skills or competencies, you can apply those to any industry. So today, I think HR looks at hiring people with the right competencies. One problem is a lot of applicants don't think of it that way. They
Hmm.
actually think, here's my experiences. And what I say is share your competencies, demonstrate where you showed those competencies and how you applied them to different situations. So I think one change I've seen is we're less looking for people with specific experience. We're looking for people who have these broad competencies, being resilient, can deal with change, right? And quickly adapt. We all talk about the four stages of change, people go through. The question is, we all go through all four stages, but some only take a day, right? They get through those four stages much quicker. Others get stuck at stage two, right? And so we look for people more with these competencies that can help us get the right people together to solve problems.
Yeah. Yeah. So whether you're HR, your hiring manager, or you're an individual looking to, you know, grow as an individual, focus on the competencies. That's the universal trait that works everywhere. Um, Awesome. So, in HR, HR has become more and more important fundamentally as we talk about the war for talent. Getting the right people, getting enough people, um, and there's so many things, whether it's increased regulation or the war for talent or new technologies. And so you've been in the CHR role and you've dealt with the complexities of many simultaneous urgent problems, long-term problems. How do you think about prioritization from a problem-solving improvement standpoint? What goes to the top of the pile?
Well, it's interesting. I've been very fortunate to work for several CEOs who always said, hey, my CHRO is my right hand and my CFO is my left hand. And there was a lot of times the three of us got together. I found it's very important as a CHRO to build a strong relation with the CFO. If you
Hmm.
think about it, your two biggest levers are human capital and your finances, right?
Yep.
So if we can get together, so we would spend a lot of time where we're going with the business strategy and what's the business objectives. And we measured everything. I do believe in what gets measured gets managed. And HR, we have KPIs on everything. And we built a integrated talent management human capital model. And think of it, there's four practice areas. Attract and hire is one, right? Develop is one. Engage is one. Retain and reward is one. And then each one of those has all these levers. The question is, for example, maybe our onboarding process is not very good, right? But we're not hiring a lot right now. So why do I focus on that problem?
Mm-hmm.
So we look back to where we go with the business, what's our objectives, what needs to happen now, right? So we had a particular situation around retention. It was critical for us to be successful in the future. We put everyone around that issue, right? And what's the problems with retention? What do we need to fix? How do we put in certain incentives to make sure we can retain the people? What's important to them? And that's where we focused our problem solving capabilities. Every function actually contributes to the business objective. The question is, how can I make a difference that's going to drive that business objective of what we're trying to achieve with our strategy long term? It's very important to have that laid out and understand what all your capabilities are and to get your team focused on those type of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll share one example to give you. So this is back in the financial crisis, back around 2008,
Yep.
2009. You remember that time?
Of course.
So WABCO stands for Westinghouse Air Brake Company. We're actually 150 years old. George Westinghouse's first invention. But we make a lot of components that go in trucks globally.
Mm-hmm.
When the financial crisis hit, a lot of our customers stopped making trucks. We lost 42% of our revenue in 1 year, like gone.
Yep.
Stock options and everything we had out there, our stock was in the 50s, 60s, went down to under $10 a share. At the same time, we were recently spun off by American Standard. We had a huge liability issue that we didn't know when that would become due. So now we're looking at this company that's been around 150 years. We could go bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
So we did get together as a senior team and said, okay, what can we do? Cash is now king. So all the stock options are gone. We were afraid we're going to lose our critical talent. So we came up with a two-pronged approach. We said, one is we don't have cash. We can't do incentives in the future. So what we did is we proactively went to the board and said, hey, for this upcoming year, 2009, we're not putting any bonus plans out there. We're not putting any incentive plans. We're giving up our cash and our targets. What we want instead is if you had a $50,000 cash target, we want you to give $25,000 in stock options as a replacement at this new low stock price. So, and do the normal stock options. And if you know anything about stock options, when the price is lower, you get a lot more options.
Mm-hmm.
So, and most of our management and even middle management and professionals got stock options. Okay. The second is we don't have cash to pay people. What are we going to do to see what can we do to keep the critical talent? So we instituted stay interviews. We interviewed every critical talent in the organization around the globe. We came up with 12 questions. The HR person and the leader met with these individuals and answered those 12 questions. A lot of them it's amazing. We always think money makes a difference. Some of it was, hey, Kevin, I want to be put on this project. Or, hey, I want to get this kind of training. It was simple little things that we could do. But 50% of the benefit was just listening to them and asking them things.
Yep.
We got all this great data out of it. Fast forward 18 months later, we didn't lose a single one of those individuals we did the stay interview with. The stock and the market rebounded, and the stock probably went up 5 to 10 times. So that 50,000 you gave up or became worth hundreds of thousands. And actually, we created quite a few millionaires that came out of that crisis. Mm-hmm. But we solved the problem, and we learned a lot about ourselves. What was even important to our employees that we probably thought other things were. We found out what we really was. So, But the focus of my team was retain and reward, find different alternatives to solve this problem. We're not onboarding. We're not recruiting people, right? Even though we had, broken processes there. Why spend time on that? Because that wasn't important to the business at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great example. And I have a chapter in the book called Creativity, basically about creativity over capital. And when in this case you have constrained capital, you don't have cash available to do stuff, and you allow the creativity to replace it. I want to ask a follow-up on that because it's very easy when especially when we're in I'll call it the habit of using capital to solve the problem. In this case, retention and reward for employees. And we're in this habit, and that capital is constrained. We feel like we just can't do as much, right? So we fight over the capital that's left. Um, what or how did you switch to rather than just worry about how to spread the peanut butter thinner? How did you get to a switch to looking for creative solutions? How did that come about?
You know, I worked for an organization. We had 11 different nationalities on the executive team. And the reason I share that is we had a lot of very creative executives with different experiences around the world. And our CEO, even in the annual report, would talk about that. And he promoted and wanted creativity. He wanted us to think outside the box. So for us, it became part of our culture, and he reinforced that. And so it was natural to do that. And we had people with different experiences. And Jamie, you get this too. Most great solutions and problems may start with one person's idea, but it's built on from other people in the room, adding to that we come up with a great idea, right? It might be a good one to start out. But when you get everyone in the room and start focusing, wow, what the solution is. So this idea started one way, and then we got more people involved and we talked about it. And then the critical thing was, how do we get the board to approve this? Because here's the problem. The board's like, you get paid the bonus at the end of the year, right? You want the $25,000 in stock options right now before the performance year. Mm-hmm. And we said, that's the retention tool, right? Let's give it to them there, right? And so, but that took some thinking and working with the board. It took them a while to buy into something like that too, because most of them are ex-CEOs of companies, and this is not something that resonated with them. Right. So I had to spend a lot of time kind of massaging that with them and working through it. But it starts with culture. And on that point, by the way, I do a lot of career coaching. I tell people, a lot of people apply for jobs. You should apply for the right culture. If you get in the right culture, you will excel. I don't care what the job is. Mm-hmm. I've seen people very talented but get in the wrong culture.
Yep.
Cool. Like if you're joining a Lean Six Sigma culture, right? You better be methodical in the way you think. You better be using tools and processes and think that way to go after things. If not, you're going to do battle constantly, right? And so to me, you really got to understand coaches, because a lot of companies, they put on their website, my employees are my biggest assets.
Right.
It's a bunch of crap. And I'll give you a real example. Actually, when I was teaching in the executive MBA, I had 5 different students from 5 different oil and gas companies, right? And when I was teaching back then, the oil and gas was going through a rough patch. Mm-hmm. We all went to the 5 companies' website, and they all talked about human capital being my employees are our biggest asset.
Yep.
All 5 took different approaches to when it got tough. One company couldn't lay off people fast enough. Right. Another company, they maybe cut back on the 401k, whatever, but they didn't lay off anyone because they proved it. And that's what I say to people is just don't look at a website. Talk to people, find out. Culture is like an iceberg. What you see above the water is what they have on their website. Right. The 2/3 that's under the water is the actual behavior, right? How do things really operate? I always, when people interview me, I love when they ask that question. I see this as your culture, Kevin, but how does things really get done here? Yeah. How do you do that? And to me, culture is the foundation. Even when I talked about attract, develop, engage, retain, the foundation is the culture. It has to be aligned to the culture you're creating. So if I'm hiring people, I need to understand what culture I am creating and making sure that people fit that culture, right? If I'm going to develop, I want to develop people to maximize their strengths in this culture, right? But if I don't have clarity there, or you have different cultures within the company, that's when things break apart, mm-hmm. right? And as you mentioned, you and I talked even before this call, new CEOs can dramatically change cultures, right? Or an acquisition, a merger, all of a sudden, boom, what fit yesterday may not fit moving forward, right? What I was valued for is no longer there.
Yeah.
So those are things to be very conscious of, but I really recommend to anyone really focus on the right know yourself first, by the way. A lot of people do not know their own brand
Yep.
and know themselves. Know yourself. And then I love when people came in and said, Kevin, this is my strengths. This is what I do. This is what I like. If that's what you guys want, I'm a good fit. If not, I'm not the right person. I interviewed thousands of people in my career, Jamie, and I felt 80% were just trying to hit the dartboard, right? Throw a dart and hit the board somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, they read the job spec and they're trying to fit it perfectly or whatever. I love when they came in hitting the bullseye. Here's what I bring. Here's why I'm here. Is that what you need and want? Because I'm the right person. And when that happens, boom, sometimes I hire the person before they even leave the building.
That's great. Going back to your story about, the different approaches when you were cash poor, the idea that the culture was built before you needed it.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
think
great point.
that's essential, and certainly I'm a big fan of a culture that's built on creativity and collaboration. Those are two big themes. Well, we're about out of time here, but from coming from your perspective, CHRO history and human capital perspective, are there any sort of last nuggets of wisdom or insight or advice that you'd like to share for our listeners?
Well, I'll share a couple of things. One, because your topic is people solve problems. What I recommend to any organization that build teams around solving problems and put in processes and tools to do that, put in some things at the beginning if it's a big problem solving team to get processes to understand who's on the team, what's their strengths, build that trust and respect first. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to move a lot faster. So it might feel a little slow in the beginning, but you're going to move through it like that change process, the 4 steps. You're going to move through it a lot faster. If you don't do that kind of work up front, you're going to hit a lot of speed bumps,
Yep.
The other thing is, as I mentioned earlier, what gets measured gets managed. Um, Make sure you can demonstrate your role and your responsibility is impacting the top line or the bottom line. Take a fresh look at that. If you can't, your job's at risk, all right? Or your function, right? Because sometimes it's not just your job, it may be a whole department, right? So really make sure you know that. And the last point I want to make is, and I've looked at a lot of companies over the last decades, and the companies that are successful are the ones that are focused on continuous improvement.
Mm-hmm.
They reinvent themselves, right? They cannibalize themselves sometimes. Like this product is no longer, it's just important. One of the presidents I worked for, one of the great lessons I got in the 90s, he said, Kevin, every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. It's just important to know what you're saying no to and stop the organization from keep doing this. I mean, I've gone into, areas just to working on projects that we killed 6 months ago. All
Yep.
right. So the reason I bring that up is then your skills is all about problem solving, continuous improvement. Are you building those capabilities? Can you collaborate and can you work with others effectively with different cultures or whatever? But if you're not building that capability, I think you're going to get left behind, over time.
Yeah. Well, great advice, Kevin. Thanks for sharing, and I'm sure our listeners will benefit from your experience and insight.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. Good to see you.